You're listening to the Love Over Addiction podcast. Hey you, it's Michelle. I'm in my backyard. You might be able to hear the birds chirping. It is a stunningly gorgeous day. I think it's 75 and sunny. There's no humidity. It's quiet. You also might be able to hear my dogs panting. They've come to join me, sitting out here in the sun talking to you. I know that this is a difficult time for you. I get it. I've been in our secret Facebook group and read the comments and understand that it's really difficult with the virus, being quarantined and shut in with somebody who's suffering from this disease. So last week I was giving you a little bit of tough love, and I think sometimes that's really appropriate and sometimes it's helpful. And then other times I think that something a little bit more gentle and loving is necessary, and that's what this week is. It's this podcast is going to be a little bit more educational too. So I'm reading this book. It has nothing to do with addiction, but I'm finding it incredibly entertaining and enlightening, and it's called Maybe You Should Talk to Someone. And I think it's by Lori Gottlieb. I think that's how you pronounce her last name. Anyways, she's a therapist, and she talks about kind of like giving up therapist secrets about how they treat their patients, what goes on behind the scenes, which I find fascinating. And in one of her chapters, it talks about a psychologist named, I'm going to get the name wrong or pronounce the name wrong, but it's James Prochaska. Something like that, guys. I don't know. But anyways, I thought his model of behavior change was really important. Now, before you start dozing off and thinking this is going to be very boring and very lame, hear me out, because I'm going to try and make it entertaining for you, okay? So basically there's this model of behavior change that he invented based on research that showing how people genuinely don't just get it. That, or just don't do it. Like that Nike slogan, just do it. It's a great tagline, and they've made billions of dollars off of that, right? Nike has, but it's not really how people behave. They don't just do it. So let's apply this to our lives. For our loved ones, just do it. Just get sober. It's actually, according to this psychologist, it doesn't happen that way. They don't just get sober. And then for us, let's say, I'll make it personal. For me, I'm always looking to eat healthier because I have an absolute obsession, passion with cooking and baking and really delicious, unhealthy food. So I keep, feeling bad about my eating habits, and I think to myself, God, if I could just stick to a diet. But this wonderful psychologist is like, no, that's not how it works. There's actually stages to change, and I'm going to talk about those stages, okay? So the first stage is pre-contemplation. Yes, it's a technical word, but I'm going to break it down for you. Basically, it's the stage where you're not even thinking that there's an issue. You're not even thinking about change. So think about when you met your loved one and they were completely oblivious to the fact that they even had a drinking or drug issue. Maybe they were partying with all their friends in college and they were like, hey, dude, everybody parties. Everybody's drinking and using drugs right now. That's just normal at this age, right? It's the pre-contemplative stage. They're not even thinking that this is something they need to address. it's often what's considered denial. So even if their drinking or drug use is like they're the last one at the party, or they're the first one to pass out, or they've gotten 4, DUIs, or they've been in jail, or basically their bad behavior and poor choices around drugs and alcohol are causing them to have serious consequences, they're still denying they really have a problem. And they're not even willing to discuss the potential issue. I remember at the very beginning of my relationship, before I even married the man I eventually fell in love with and who had addiction issues, probably the first couple of years of our relationship was just me trying to convince him that there was an issue, that this wasn't normal drinking behavior, that buying a case of beer for 2 people is not normal. Or, I remember he refused to go to movies. The only movies he would ever attend with me were matinees. We could never go to the movies in the evening. And I could not figure out why until it hit me that there was a movie theater, this was, millions of years ago, that opened up down the street that served dinner and drinks while watching the movie. And it wasn't until that movie theater opened that he agreed to go to the movies in the evening with me. And that's when it hit me. And I thought, oh, it's because you want to drink at night every night. And a movie theater typically, you don't get served beer or wine there back in the day. I didn't know they do that now. But so again, just complete denial, there was a real problem. So that's the first phase, okay? And I know you guys can relate to that. And if I could just interject here before we move on to the second stage. So their responsibility in stage 1 is denying that there's an issue. Our responsibility, because we don't believe in this community that our lives have become a mess entirely because it's their fault. We have to take accountability and responsibility for our future and our current state of mess and how we got there, right? I mean, that's what we believe in. We can't just blame the addict and alcoholic for everything in our lives. We have responsibility too. Nobody put a gun to our head and forced us to be in a relationship with these people. And nobody's holding a gun to our head and saying we have to stay. So if we agreed to enter a relationship and we're sticking around and we're miserable, we're not happy, or we're not living our best life according to Oprah, well, then we have to have responsibility in that. You and I have to take responsibility for how we ended up here and why we continue to put up with it. And so in stage 1, their fault is the denial that they have an issue. What our responsibility and our fault is trying to convince them that they do. I mean, the amount of energy and countless hours I spent. I used to get pamphlets. I used to buy books and leave them around the house. I would lecture. I would nag. I would beg. I would compare him to everybody else. I did everything to manipulate and try and control to get him to admit that he had a problem. And thinking that if he just admitted it, then everything would be better, right? Because isn't that what... I'm sorry, guys. There's like a lawnmower around here. It's really loud, isn't it? It's actually in the... Hold on. Hang with me. I'm so sorry. This is live. This is real live stuff. There's no fancy recordings. If he doesn't go away... Ugh. Okay, sorry about that, guys. My neighbor was mowing their lawn. It's pretty loud. Okay, so back to what I was saying is... Listen, our responsibility in this stage is trying to convince them not trying to convince them that they have a problem, letting them discover that on their own. Because like I was saying, I thought the secret was, step number 1 in Alcoholics Anonymous. We admit we have a problem and are powerless over this disease. I thought if I got him to admit this, then that would be the beginning of his recovery. And for me, it took 7 years in between finally breaking him down and getting him to admit that he had a problem. And I remember the day because it was when he got sick all over we lived in Boston and in a walk-up, and he was at a bar and got sick at the front of the stairs of the walk-up. And he was like, okay, I admit it, because it was disgusting and he had to clean it up. And sorry to gross you out, but I know you guys have been there. And that was the day where he finally, and then he took it back a couple months later and said, no, I don't have a problem. I was just, you were making me say I had a problem. You pressured me into doing it. So bottom line is, don't waste your energy trying to get them to admit anything. It's fine. You know that they have an issue. Honestly, they know they have an issue underneath all of that denial. And it doesn't need to be, admitting it out loud is not the key to change. Like all of the movies, portray that it is, right? They have movies out there that say they admitted it and then their life changed. Very rarely does that happen. Okay, so that's stage 1. Stage 2 is contemplation. And this is when the person recognizes there's a problem, finally, and they're willing to talk about it, and they're not opposed to taking action, but they just can't seem to follow through. Okay, so this is a refreshing stage. This is when they finally say, once and for all, yeah, I might be addicted to drugs or alcohol or pornography or whatever else, they're addicted to. And you feel so relieved because you feel like you're not crazy. Because a lot of times, right, this disease makes you feel like you're the one with the issues and you're going nuts because they're trying to convince you of things that things aren't really as bad as they are. And you're just overreacting, or you're no fun, or you're a party pooper. And finally, when they say, yes, I have a problem, and you can actually dialogue about it, it feels like a renewed sense of hope. You feel so relieved and validated that it hasn't been you at all, that you're not crazy, that you're actually an incredibly smart human being that has been sober and waiting for this relationship breakthrough to happen. And so it reinvigorates the relationship. Oftentimes this happens and you recommit to following through with the relationship. Maybe before this you were like contemplating leaving if things didn't get better, or there weren't signs of recovery in the future. And then your partner admits that they might be out of control, and they might need help, and that they start talking about the options of rehab or outpatient treatment or AA meetings or therapy. Or maybe they're just even like, look, I'm not going to bring alcohol into the house, or I'm not going to hang out with that friend, or I'm going to delete my drug dealer's number off of my phone. Whatever like strategies they're considering, it automatically presents you an opportunity to recommit to the relationship you were thinking about possibly leaving. And here's the thing though, okay? When you're dealing with somebody who's struggling with addiction, this contemplative state, this phase 2, it can also be used as a way to manipulate and trick you. Because the first time they do it, they probably are really genuine about it, right? They want to change. They understand that addiction is bringing them a tremendous amount of pain. A lot of times it brings financial debt. Oh, here comes the lawnmower again. Let me move, guys. I'm so sorry. it brings in a lot of, like, it could bring debt. It could bring emotional pain to family members, or even, they could be having issues with their job. So there are consequences to their addiction. But they're also incredibly sensitive to the fact that you probably got really excited, extra loving, super hopeful at the idea of them getting help. And so they're smart. They catch on to this, and then they use that every time you threaten to leave or there's a serious consequence. They turn back to this kind of trick, this little manipulation that they keep in their back pocket, and they say, oh, you're right. I did mess up. I will try to do better. Let me look up an AA meeting, or let me Google or research a rehab, or I'll commit to going to couples therapy with you. Why don't you make the appointment? And then very rarely do they follow through long term. So it becomes this, the contemplative state almost can be used as a negative, and a tool in their toolbox of manipulation. And the contemplative state can be years and years and years. It depends. Okay, so one more thing about the contemplative state is that in the book, the author mentions that this is a stage where people procrastinate or self-sabotage as a way to starve off change, and even positive change, because they are reluctant to give something up without knowing what they'll get in its place. Now, what I just said is extremely valid and could pertain to you as well. So I'm going to read it again. And I want you to think about this not from the standpoint of the addict or alcoholic, but of yourself, the loved one. I'm going to read it again, okay? So actually, let me put this into a question for you. Are you procrastinating, or are you self-sabotaging as a way to starve off change? Even positive change, because you are reluctant to give something up, and that's something, like if we're talking about leaving, right? Leaving them, you might have to give up your house. You might have to give up some of your friends. You might need to give up some of your financial wealth. You might need to give up control. You might need to give up hope. You might need to give up on them, on your loved one. So are you reluctant to give something up without knowing what you'll get in its place? Oh my gosh, so good, right? Because this is another reason why, we talked about it a couple weeks ago, why we stay in these unhealthy relationships. Number one is because we're in love with them. But also, let's address this, it's because we don't know if we let them go, what does our future possibly look like? Some of us have been so attached and so invested in this relationship that the idea of not waking up and dealing with the chaos and the turmoil and the instability is scary. It's like we can't even imagine a future that's calm. In a way, we've become addicted to the addiction. And so the idea of anything other than unhealthiness, is that a word? I don't know, but I'm going to use it anyways. Unhealthiness, the idea of having a healthy future and how we get that and what that looks like is so foreign to us. We can't even imagine it. So the author says in this stage, the hiccup, right, the roadblock, is that change involves the loss of the old and the anxiety of the new. So if we apply this to our loved ones who are suffering from addiction, we can say they are in the contemplative state for a long extended period of time because the change involves the loss of the old meaning the bar, the drugs, the alcohol, the bottles, the coping mechanism. And then the new, there's a huge anxiety for them about not having these coping tools, the numbing out that drugs and alcohol provide. Well, then how are they going to cope with the pain that they've been shoving down? That idea, that concept, that everything that they've been trying to run away from by using drugs and alcohol will just resurface. Well, that idea creates tons of anxiety for our loved ones. It's so overwhelming sometimes. That's why people resort back to, if they've been sober for a while, that's why they relapse, because the anxiety of the feelings and the situations that they haven't dealt with in their life. And this is why you and I and we run away from our healing too. We run away from what we're being called to do in these relationships, which is learn to say no and put our foot down. Learn not to be liked and be okay with that. Learn boundaries and how to enforce them in our world and in our life. That provides us with a lot of anxiety. I know just mentioning some of these words are like trigger words, right? For you, for me, because it's so funny how much we struggle just like the alcoholic or addict does. Like we're both fighting our own battles separately. So it's the very reason why you were kind of like a magnet to your loved one is because you both are struggling with very different issues, but similar battles. And you both came into this relationship unhealthy and have work to do. And when you came into this relationship, you were attracted to this person because they provided you an opportunity to run away from your issues that you needed to address. You could focus on them. You could focus on their addiction and make them feel better, so you didn't have to focus on yourself. And the addict, similarity, whatever, guys. It's like day 30 of this virus and I'm losing my mind. But the addict, just like you is using drugs and alcohol to run away from their issues. So you both have been running away, and you both need to learn adult coping skills on how to handle, your life, your pain, your past, and your future in order to show up as two healthy individuals together in a relationship. So that is why usually a codependent is attracted to an addict, and an addict seeks out a codependent. All right, I hope that makes sense to you. So the thing with the contemplation phase is that part of the process of getting to the next stage, which we're going to talk about, is you have to repeat the same thing over and over a ridiculous amount of times before you're ready to change. In other words, you have to get burned. So think of like a hot stove. Unfortunately, codependents and addicts both have the same thing, same struggles in this area. We touch the stove, the hot burner on the stove, get burned and go, oh, that hurt, and then keep touching it like over and over and over again until our hands are completely blistered and everyone's looking at us going, what on God's green earth are you doing? Why do you keep getting burned and hurt and keep going back to touching it, right? That's how people like judge us. Why do you need to keep getting drunk or getting DUIs or getting consequences for doing these addictive behaviors, and you still keep putting the bottle to your mouth or buying the drugs or whatever? It's because for some reason I always consider myself just one of those people that it takes an extra long time. We learn the hard way. There's that Dixie Chick song, Taking the Long Way Around. I think that's the name of the song. But it basically is like, look, all of my peers learned this lesson really early and really, in their youth. And I just had to learn the hard way. And it took me a much longer route to get to the destination that all my peers were at. I just think that song applies to us in a lot of ways. So it does take us a ridiculous amount of times to get hurt in order to learn to change our behaviors and go into the next stage. And we're going to talk about that. So the next stage that we're going to talk about is called preparation. And preparation is when you have gotten hurt enough where you're now ready to prepare for getting better. So what does this look like? This means that if you are addicted to drugs and alcohol, you're doing your own research on ways to get better. Maybe it means that you're researching online, or perhaps you're watching a documentary about somebody else who got sober, or you're interested in AA meetings, and so you've perhaps attended one or two or looked up where they are, where they're located in your area. You're preparing for your sobriety. Now, if you're a loved one who's suffering from addiction, if you love somebody suffering from addiction, preparation to get better, it might look like you are driving around neighborhoods and you're thinking about where you would live if you left. Or maybe you have looked up online local therapists who specialize in addiction and are looking to go to therapy just on your own. Or maybe you actually probably have found us. That's why you're listening to this podcast. You're in the preparing stage where you're looking for tools from experts who could help you with this. Maybe you joined one of our programs. Maybe you've gone to an Al-Anon meeting or looked up an Al-Anon meeting. This is preparation. You're preparing to get the life that you think you deserve. You're preparing to commit to a wellness program or healing, or to admit that maybe it's time to change your behaviors, that you're not committed to the idea anymore that your future and your happiness lies entirely in your partner's hands. That's what preparation looks like, okay? Now, the next phase is action, stage 4. And this is when we actually commit to whatever it is that we think is going to help us get better. So for our loved ones who are addicted, it might be attending AA meetings every day. Some people even attend them 2 or 3 times a day. I've heard of that too. But let's say they attend the meetings once a day for the next 30 days. It could mean checking into a 30-day rehab program, or sober living house. It could mean them going into the fridge and pouring down all of the alcohol and liquor and raiding it out of the house, deleting all of the contacts from their phone who are bad influences on them. It might even mean moving, like changing and picking up your life entirely and going to another state. That's actually quite common. And for you, action means investing in yourself. It means when you stop waking up every day with the idea and the belief system that you are here and put on this earth to make their lives better, to get them sober, to help them. And instead you replace those thoughts with, you know what? I'm not as healthy of a person as I think I am. I need to put all of that energy and focus on me and getting myself strong and recovered from this relationship, which has really done a serious amount of damage to me, to my soul, to the way that I feel about myself, to the way that I approach other people. You probably have trust issues. With your trusting yourself and trusting others, you've probably been berated, because addiction does a really good job of telling you how awful you are to deflect attention from the addiction. So you probably have a lot of negative beliefs about yourself that you might have already come into this relationship with, and then this relationship validated those feelings, right? So there's a lot of work that you need to be done too, and so you need to seek the help to get yourself to be the confident and proud woman that you deserve to feel and be and happy. So that might mean therapy for you. It might mean joining our programs. It might mean going out with some friends instead of, monitoring his drinking or their drugs. It might mean identifying really clear boundaries and enforcing them consistently, not being wishy-washy about that. It might mean going on vacation with some girlfriends and leaving them behind, or your guy friends. It might mean getting a job, which would take your mind off of their addiction and give you something to feel proud about. Whatever it is, whatever action you need to take, this is a wonderful stage, because this is when you see change. And this is when your life starts to improve. This is where all of the research pays off. And when you really start to see change in your life is in this phase. And it takes a while to get here. Like we started out saying, it's Nike's just do it. If you jumped into this stage immediately, you probably wouldn't be successful, and you probably wouldn't be able to get to the last and final stage, which is maintenance. Now, here's the key. Maintenance is probably the most important phase of this whole process, because now that we've just done it, and now that we're doing it and we're taking action, it's not as simple as one and done. Like, you can't just create this program for yourself and then that suits you for the rest of your life. I mean, think about as far as like your physical health, right? We age, so that exercise program that you started when you were 20 probably can't do it when you're 50. And if you can, that's amazing, but very rare. So you need to adjust and adapt accordingly. So maintenance is about tweaking. It's about taking self-inventory almost to the point of obsession and going, how is this working for me? So for me, I'll give you an example. My maintenance was, while I was going through my divorce, I was going to my therapist once a week, and I just felt like, okay, during a certain time in the divorce where things were really, really yucky and stressful, I felt like I needed more help. And so I went to my therapist 3 times a week. I went to her individually twice, and then a group in the evenings once. And that was because I constantly took self-inventory and said, all right, am I feeling stressed? Am I feeling sad? Am I feeling healthy? And if so, what do I need? Or what am I doing that's working that I can do more of? And at that particular time, I felt incredibly stressed and I needed extra support. So just for a couple months, it wasn't long term, I went to my therapist 3 times a week and it was perfect. And then I asked myself after a couple months, do I still need this? Do I need this support now? And I didn't. So I went back down to once a month. And I still, you guys, this maintenance tool, mastering this is like genius. It's like, I hate the word life hack, or maybe that's 2 words, I don't know. But I don't like that. I don't like thinking life hacks, but it is one thing that is a tool if you master, just like boundaries, that you will use for the rest of your life, which is maintenance is one of those things that if you take self-inventory, it means you're taking a moment to check in with yourself and meeting your own needs, making them important, and then having all of these amazing results because you're willing to do that. You're not relying on anyone else to meet your own needs, and you are answering and solving your own problems. That's what maintenance is. And so this is why I go back to always saying, you guys, listen, for those of you that are feeling sad or weak or hopeless or depressed, this disease, their addiction, is your greatest blessing. Because if you follow these stages, if you learn these lifelong tools, I promise you, you will come out an amazing human being and so new and improved. The best version of you, all the cliches, right? All of them, they all apply to you because this is your opportunity and your chance. And I know y'all probably get sick of me saying it, but good Lord, you need reminding. I want to be that positive voice in your head that replaces the negative addiction voice. It's telling you, take this opportunity, use it, apply it. It doesn't matter if they're getting sober or not. It does not matter about their mental health or their responsibility of getting sober. Who cares if they're getting better? I mean, we do care, but not to the point where we're going to sit around and stunt our growth because based on their motivation. Get yourself motivated. Get yourself healthy. Get yourself in a better place. And I'm leaving now and I'm ending this because I cannot handle these lawnmowers. I feel like every neighbor on all sides of me is mowing their lawn right now. So I love you and thank you so much from the bottom of my heart for sticking with me through this virus. I didn't want to stop working. I didn't want to stop providing you with helpful tools, especially now. But like most other business and podcast out there, I'm pretty limited. If I go inside, I have all my kids. So I come outside. So that's it. That was a plane going by. Oh, guys, I love you. We're in this together. And thank you for sticking with me and giving me grace.
This podcast is created for your support, encouragement, and entertainment with Michelle's personal thoughts and beliefs. From one woman to another, bonded together by the fact we love someone suffering from addiction. This is not intended as a substitute for therapy or advice from a professional.